Hi there, and welcome to a post by Ange. Today's how-to is how to repair your clothes.
So here are today's supplies. All you'll need is whatever garment you'll be working on, a dollar store sewing kit. I have two variations that I found here at the dollar store. One was a larger one, I believe it was closer to $2, and the smaller kit was at that $1 mark. Here I am with the garment that needs to be repaired. I have a split edge there, a split seam. So I'm just looking for colors that will match the yarn in the garment. So this is a really bright yellow, doesn't really match too well. Going with whatever is in my other dollar store kit. I found a mustardy yellow, looks a bit closer to the actual color of the garment that I'll be working with today. So that one I'm deciding to go with, the other putting it back to where it belongs. Getting out my thimble and my needle that I'll be working with, as well as my little dollar store scissors. All of these items can be located within the dollar store kits that I purchased. So once I had all my supplies out, I just eyeballed how much yarn I thought I'd need. I always enjoy having more thread than less. I find that it's easier to work with the garment and with the thread when you have more. This way you avoid having to bind off on the thread and start a new line of yarn that you'll be working with. So you can see I tied 3 knots into the end of the thread. I got my thimble on, I turned the garment inside out, and I also put the opposite end of the thread, the non-knotted side, through the eyelet of the needle. Using my fingers, I just manipulated the garment into the seam that it was split from. I found the area where the seam had split, and I went back a few millimeters to overlap where the split had broken away and started. That way I'm securing that area and preventing the likelihood of this happening again. As you can see, I took the knotted side of the thread and I worked from the back of the garment to the front, pulling the thread through. And then I would just reverse that movement, putting the thread through the front of the garment toward the back. And I just continued to repeat this process back to front, front to back, until the thread was completely secured into the fabric and seam. I found that the thimble got in my way, so I decided to ditch it, despite having that little cut on my fingertip. You can see there's lots of excess yarn at the tail end there. I'll manage that when I'm done. Some of those little bits of thread are also from the garment prior to me working on it, where the thread actually had broken. So I'll do all my cleanup and tidy work at the end of the sewing. So back to front, front to back. I kept checking to make sure the garment was still nicely tucked up within the seam. Hindsight, I should have used probably a clothing pin or another pin just to secure the fabric, but I usually prefer to work with my hands on these smaller little projects. And as I closed in that gap there, it became much easier to work the needle from back to front and front to back. Now I want to assure you that this does work. You just need to take your time. It does come with practice. And one of the most important things you can do here is not pull on the thread too tightly. You want to have a nice organic gauge. So let the yarn guide you. Don't tug tightly on it. It could cause the thread to break, and then you would have to pull all of the thread back out. So take your time. Don't be too heavy-handed on pulling the fabric, the thread through the fabric. And you can see here I'm now done. So I'm just taking the needle, I'm looping it over and over again, the end portion of the thread, and then I tied off with a knot. Going back to the beginning, you can see there's a lot of knots. Oh, I guess I decided to do a few extra, making sure it was nice and secure. Coming in with the dollar store scissors. So these were a big hunk of junk, I must say, but I wanted to keep this cost efficient. I do have handier scissors within the home, but I felt that in order to make the video authentic, that I would work with what I had. So now I'm just finding the little threads that split through. I'm pulling a thread that was hanging out of the front of the garment, and I pulled it through into the back. And I'm tying off that loose thread with the thread I sewed with. So again, it's secure and it's not going to split again. And this is the finished product. Me turning the shirt back in the right side out, and you can see that the garment is nice and complete. Here's example number 2. So there's a small little puncture hole in here, likely from one of my cat's claws. And again, I begin by color matching. So using the blue within the dollar store kit, and it was a little too bright, so I decided that black would be best. I put the needle through the garment because the puncture hole was so small. However, when I do wear this shirt, my bra does do a little peekaboo through the little hole. So I decided it was time to close this. So keep in mind, whenever you have a puncture hole in a shirt, you need to work with a really loose hand here. So you don't want to pull on the thread too tightly or it's going to pucker the thread. So be loose with your hand. Again, I start by turning the garment inside out, using that needle as a marker to discover the little keyhole marking there. So I'm just trying to find it. Even with wearing my glasses and using the extra lighting equipment, I still struggled to find where this hole was. So here I am threading the thread through the eyelet of the keyhole and pulling the remainder of the thread through. I haven't tied off yet, and that's an important piece. So now I'm locating that little puncture mark, and once I found it, I'm teasing, using the tip of the needle point to tease the threads that were loose, and I thread through one side and into the other side of the hole, and now you can see I'm just creating a very soft knot and pulling it gently through. So the purpose of doing that is to ensure that I'm not going to create a pucker in the garment. This puncture mark is right on the bosom area of the shirt, and again, I don't want that to be shown here. So I'm just very loosely pulling, guiding that thread through, using my fingertips to just give little tugs, and then I go back and I pull on the fabric. Well, here I am, just pulling the thread through very softly and gently, turning over to the front of the work to see if it's pilling or puckering the fabric, which it isn't. I also wanted to make sure that I did as few passovers with the thread to close off that hole as possible, as I didn't want to create a little yarn or thread bulge in the shirt, a little protrusion. So I wanted the fabric to remain as flat as possible. So once I felt I was at completion, I just passed the needle a few times through, created a knot at the end, and snipped off the tail end. There's still a little bit of excess, so I got in a little bit closer there. And once I was done with that, I turned the garment right side out, spread it out to make sure there was no bulging, and then used my finger to push to ensure, again, they wouldn't create a bulge.
My sincerest apologies that you're unable to see the exact stitch work that I've done within each of these videos and on each of these garments. Here is some mock versions of what I was doing so that you can better see the contrast between the fabric, the yarn, and what techniques I was using.
Just using 2 napkins here, and I pinched the edges together. I've already knotted my string, and I pulled it from back to front and then thread it through front to back. Back to front, front to back. So I'm making big exaggerated stitches here so that you can really see them. I did a very neat and tinier version of this on the actual garments. So this is me just freehanding it. It wasn't meant to be a perfect stitch, but you can see how it looks. And this is the other technique I did, using the needle head, pushing the needle through and then back in on its fabric, through and back in, through and back in, almost like an accordion, and pulling the string all the way through. So you've completed multiple stitches at once. This creates a more consistent look.
Once again, thank you for tuning in to A Post by Ange. I hope you found some useful tips and tricks in order for you to repair and restore some of your clothing and garments at home so that your closet remains affordable and efficient for your lifestyle. Let me know what you have been repairing, and let me know if there's a different stitch you prefer. Any comments are more than welcome.
Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment on my page.